Hello, this is Jarvis Sam.
And Renuka Reggae.
Today we are here with Ms.
Maria Christina Cizon Panis Poiseau.
through the Houston Asian American Archive through Rice University.
And we're here today in Razor Hall at Rice. So, I guess we can start with, so you were born in Houston.
Yes.
Right. But were your parents also born in Houston or somewhere else?
No, they were born in a little town in the Philippines called Agoo La Union. So
Okay.
it's like the northern part of the island. You need like a plane, train, and automobile or something to get there.
Oh,
So.
is it pretty small?
It's fairly small. I think they've only just recently been declared a city, but it's usually a province.
Okay.
Yeah,
So how did they come to Houston?
Well, they started off, I think it's my mom, right? So she started off taking nursing school in the Philippines and then immigrated over because there was an opportunity for jobs back in the 70s. So there's a mass migration of the Filipino nurses back then. I think it was late 60s, early 70s, due to what I've read, nursing shortages. And my father, of course, came after her. So it really was the driver. He was actually an accounting major, but he happened to have taken some electrical courses because his father was an engineer, and that in itself just got him the job here. So, but it was his desire to really be an American and be with my mom, probably more in priority the other way around.
Right.
Be with my mom, that he's like, whatever it takes, you know, to get here. And then if I happen to get a job that barely pays, you know, we'll figure it out. I'm gonna be with my lady. So that's kind of how that was the driver. And the funny thing is that they ended up living in an apartment complex in the medical center. And they built a community of other Filipinos, and they all were doing the same thing. So it was like there was all nurses, and all the men had come over to seek either their wives or girlfriends or to meet up with them. So it ended up being this thing that blew up. And then we kept in touch ever since then with their kids as the generations grew. And I always thought they were our uncles. and I said, aren't we cousins in some past life? You know, like grandma can look back in the tree, but it's like, actually, no. We just all lived in this apartment complex, and that's what brought us together. So I was like, only recently we found that out.
Wow.
You know, when one of them, passed away, unfortunately. But we always asked, well, what's the connection? And I was like, well, how are we related? Show me on the tree. And finally, my dad said, we're not. And except for maybe one or two of them, Grandma could probably figure that one out. But other than that, it was the apartment complex and med center. So, anyways, long answer to a short question.
No, that's fine.
So the combination of the desire for labor and love kind of built a family?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it was really more, I think the economy in the Philippines wasn't doing well at the time, and my father said inflation was very high, and then of course, I think of course, President Marcos had been president for how many years? Forever, right? Exceeding 4-year terms like we would have here. Slowly after a while, you begin to wonder, is it, democracy? Right. But and he said that because he told me he processed credit card statements in the Philippines, and one of the credit card statements he came across was Frank Sinatra's. So he thought it was. He's like, yeah, they used to come over and party over in the Philippines all the time, and all these famous people, because credit cards weren't common back then. But he was an accountant by his school trade, and that's what he did. They would process the statements back then, and so. But he came here, and that's what drove him here, is to be with Mom. She immigrated over, with a whole class of other nurses, and they would come over in just batches, like 20 to 40 at a time, and so they themselves also kind of became a sorority, of a culture. So they kind of, and of course, when you're in a foreign country, you try to stick together. I remember stories of them saying they didn't even know how to go to the grocery store, didn't know how to buy rice. I'm allergic to beef, so I thought that chicken fried steak was chicken, and they were just,
Yeah.
And then one of them told me about how they roomed with another Japanese girl, and the Filipinos and the Japanese didn't, generationally in World War II, not a good thing. So she thought she was always trying to poison her. And yeah, so I mean, it was just, why did, the nursing school at the time didn't think to not pair them together.
Right.
That, they could probably be arch enemies back home. And then the Japanese girl tried to be nice and make her a little boiled egg every day because she knew she was starving because she didn't know how to buy food for herself, and she thought she was trying to poison her, so she'd take the egg so it didn't seem like she was being mean, but she'd hide it or throw it away. But I mean, that's just to show you how being in a foreign country, and they were just terrified, on who to ask for help. And they very much stuck to their community when they came over. So those are the stories I grew up with. And I'm just like, they're like, why did they put me with this? So, those are my, I was like, oh gosh, if I ever meet somebody who's Japanese, will I ever think that same way? So it certainly is a cultural experience in itself. So, but hopefully that helped.
Yeah. So that was, you said, in the 70s when they came over, and so I guess you were born not long after.
Right. So I was born in 1973.
Okay.
So September 14th. Okay. And I remember that was the same day my father said he had found out he had gotten his job.
Oh, okay.
So it was just a very significant.
So what did he do? What was his job?
His job was in electrical engineering. He could, every time. Yeah, I'm how old now, and I can't honestly tell you what my father did for a living. But he would always fill out on like his taxes, wireman or electrician.
Okay.
And then there would be photos of him, over these gadgets, piecing together. And later I asked him, I go, what is it you do exactly? And he goes, well, now I just print up all the labels for the turbines so I could tell all the rookies who don't know how to wire together the electrical turbines how to piece them together.
Oh.
So he's like, he basically maps it out and makes sure that they understand, like, plug A into a socket. So, I mean, I know it's not rocket science, but, I can't imagine they pay too much at the plant, so, unless it's overtime or holiday. But that's what I think he did, although half of them think he should have been fishing the whole time.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if you know about culture at plants and refineries and things like that, but it tends to be mostly male, and I know it was in San Jacinto, right? And half the time they're, I guess, exchanging jokes. Okay, so I never hear about what my father actually does at work. I always hear about the social aspect of it. He's exchanging jokes, and they're bringing over their hot peppers that they've grown in their gardens, marinated them, and having hot pepper eating contests during the lunch break in the lunchroom. So my Mexican hot pepper jar is much more spicier than your Filipino peppers, but my Thai peppers are better. So it's quite, everybody are children at the end of the day.
Really funny.
Yeah, but what he actually did, though, from what I understood, getting back to the topic, is he called himself a wireman electrician. So,
okay.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with your parents' professions, what type of lifestyle did this afford for your family?
So, I think it was still tough because Dad and Mom kept having kids. Because they're Catholic. And so what goes with that is lots of children. So one kid, they probably figured it out. Two, okay. After the third and fourth, my dad, I think, eventually started to immigrate. He was calling Grandma back in the homeland saying, can you come help because I can't afford daycare. And after the fifth child comes, it's like, forget about it, right? So we lived in a small house before we were 5 over on Herm Clark. And that is a tough neighborhood. I don't know if you know that, but it's a tough neighborhood even today. And then my dad's like, okay, we need more rooms, so we moved into Missouri City in a house. It was only 3 bedrooms. And so eventually it was like 5 kids. And then Grandma comes over. And then it's like, so it's 3 rooms, 5 kids, Grandma, and then he's like, well, I'm in a position where I can help my brothers. And he sponsors them to come over. So we're all in a house together. And so all the kids managed to fit in one room. I remember it was a bunk bed and a twin bed. And then I had my own bed because I was the oldest. So I would be in the top. And then the 2 boys shared a bed and the 2 girls shared a bed.
Okay.
And then Grandma had her own room until the uncles came, and then, she had to, like, get twin beds, but we were all... So,
Wow.
it was like a whole generation in there. I just remember we were all just jam-packed in there, and at the time, as long as I had my own bunk bed, you don't think about it.
It's good enough for you.
Well, with that many kids, you always you entertain each other. So you only remember, playing in the bayou behind the house.
Right.
I would never let my children play in the bayou. I'm like, what were they thinking? Because there was crawfish and alligators and snakes in that thing.
And chemicals.
And chemicals and God knows what else. But yeah, so we lived behind there. And I remember we'd be on top of the swing set and we'd look behind it and there was even a landfill behind there.
Oh my
so
gosh.
it was like, oh, probably not, we weren't aware of pollution and environmental conditions. So we didn't think anything of it. We just thought it was this mysterious big hill. And like, wow, what is that landfill over there? And I don't think it was trash. I think it was just they were moving dirt around.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't. It wasn't trash. We would have smelled it. But it was supposedly one of the newer neighborhoods back then.
Okay.
And so it was an upgrade from Herm Clark, from what my father considered. And then we all. So the living conditions, I guess, were still okay because you don't think beyond your means, right? What you think you need, unless you've seen things on TV, perhaps. And other Filipinos ended up buying houses next to us. So it was like a row of us, 5 or 6 of us.
Oh, okay.
And so they had kids, and so we'd just go back and forth and play.
Yeah.
So the only thing, but my father, he's very keen on education and religion. So they made sure that another reason probably why we had to do such budget cuts is they wanted to make sure we went to Catholic school.
Okay.
So at the point when, after one kid goes to Catholic school, it's okay. Second kid goes, it's okay. Third kid, okay. And then when all 5 of us were in Catholic school, he's like, okay, this is the last year. Christy graduates. Then we all transplant and go elsewhere. And so what he decided to do was to take all the money he was saving and bought us a house in Sugar Land. A bigger house, and he says, oh, wow, with all this money we've now accumulated and spending on private school, we could have spent to live in a better neighborhood and go to a better school. And so we ended up going to the Fort Bend schools in Sugar Land. So
okay.
Yeah.
So then they went to public school.
Yeah, in what he thought was a nicer neighborhood.
Yeah.
So, because back then, that neighborhood started to get kind of rough where we were growing up in too. Because I just visions of bullies and things in my head. Because you're only private school kids and nobody knows you. So then you go out to play, and so they all want to pick on you, and so But luckily, it was a pack of 5 of us kids, so we'd all, we were, elementary school and junior high, you do only so much. But very close knit, tight. They would only stick to themselves though. Not very often they would bring in strangers to our little community of people.
Okay.
So, and they were just neighbors with the people that they met at that one apartment.
Yeah.
So they all decided, let's all buy houses next to each other.
Oh, okay.
Right. So it was all, I remember there was always somebody nearby
Yeah.
that they could trust. So
So, how far apart were you and your siblings?
all 2 years.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
I wasn't planned that way.
Well, all I know is that my dad wanted 2 boys. And so I was born. And, okay, that's great. I'm going to have another one. Okay, got a boy. So you got your boy and your girl. Well, one more boy would be good. Okay. Well, then my sister Judy was born. Okay, well, it's okay. 3 is a good number, but 4 might be a better number. So we'll try again. And my sister Gina was born. Okay, and finally he's convinced my mom one last time, let's try for a boy. And finally, my brother Joey was born. So, yeah, he really wanted to have 2 boys and a girl, but now we got an entourage. So that's how that ended up happening. But, yeah, we were all 2 years apart. I figured that's all my mom could probably manage. Yeah, she's a nurse, so at the hospital they kept asking, he's like, what's in the water? It seemed like she was always in that condition. So.
Yeah.
But
wow.
Did your family ever travel back to the Philippines during your childhood?
They did when I was, I want to say I was 4, and then my brother was there June. They call him June because he's Junior, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's short for Junior. He actually has another real name legally, but Jun is a very common reverent term for the firstborn male in our culture. And so I guess they wanted to show off, their kids. And they told me it was right around Christmas time because I was singing Christmas carols in the middle of an island, and they were just thought it was the cutest thing. So that was when we went back, and then I went back again. And so keep in mind, my parents have 5 kids.
Right.
So it's not very cheap to travel with that many kids, and much less to a third world country that you have to go planes, trains, and automobiles to go get to. And so in order to see the family, they decided that my mom, she's very religious, so she would participate in a pilgrimage. So she's like, I can go on a discount and bring the family through the pilgrimage. So it actually was a very educational experience for me, and I was at an impressionable age of 14 by then. And so at 14, we were traveling the island, visiting the, bishop's palace and, all the religious landmarks, and it's very impressionable. It's almost a mix between, very paganistic and Catholic, because if you think about how they probably integrated the cultures into the religion, it was. So I remember walking up some mountain in a city called Baguio. Right, it's not far from where my parents are, and there's this statue in an open temple, and its heart is like what they claim was bleeding real blood, right? It was some sort of apparition, and it was this. I remember when we were going up that hill and mountain, there was just villagers carrying a 12-foot boa constrictor. They're just like, we got dinner, and I'm sitting there looking at it, going, did that just come down the same mountain we're about to go up? Because I was like, I'm Americanized and raised with Scooby-Doo and whatnot, TV and, not hamburgers, because parents didn't buy hamburgers, right? So Dad grew vegetables in his garden, and the food he was used to from back home. So I guess you'd call it organic today, but Grandma, when she was imported over, she made all the dishes, so we were very much into that food.
Yeah.
Hamburgers only every now and then for kids. Oh yes. Oh no, it's only a special treat. So I always think of Eddie Murphy and the House Burger. I don't know if you ever heard that skit that he does, but Google it sometime. It's hilarious. But I got a House Burger, so that was really exciting. If we actually got McDonald's, it was supposed to be like a few rare occasions you get so excited. But that was when But getting back to where we were on our trail to the islands, that was when I was back last, and so. Right now, usually if my father needs to go back, I usually fund his trips. Or like right now I have unfortunately it's like a sick uncle, so I might have to, he wants me to go with him though, and that's in February, so I'm thinking I'm going to do that, and because I have work around, my company is global, I'm trying to see, while I'm over there, should I swing by Singapore and Malaysia? So I'm like, how can it's not often you make it to the other side of the world, how can I make this trip beneficial business-wise, right? So I'm plotting right now. So it's a win-win for the company, I think. So yeah.
So what other than you mentioned the food, were there other aspects of Filipino culture around you while you were growing up? Well, I know you were surrounded by Filipino people. Right.
Well, definitely I'd have to say, I could go down the list, right? Yeah. So I meet other Filipino colleagues today, right? And they actually think I'm Mexican.
Oh, really?
Because I don't have an accent. And so it confuses them. Okay, and then I'm also, very dark, and I look probably, because, Filipinos, the Spanish conquered the island for 400 years, right. And my last name means bread in Spanish, so there's probably a little cross-pollination going on. But, so when I think about culturally, it's like, all the aspects of growing up is religion, the very Catholicness of it. There's always all these unspoken rules, right? You have to say the rosary, or even now as I'm growing up, I always hear different unspoken rules that have to happen. That I'm like, nobody told me this. I write a blog, and so I kind of write about that, right? 2 things that people never write down are recipes and oral history. And because I wanted to reconnect back with that part of myself, the Filipino-ness, because it's like, if people don't think I'm Filipino, well, you know, maybe I'm not figuring out the Filipino-ness enough, because I think I got lost on the language, because I have such a good English accent that my parents didn't really speak the language to me. They tried. Okay, so what you may or may not know about the Philippines, there's so many dialects, thousands of dialects across the islands. And so there's a main one called Tagalog, it's the main language. And so, but they're from this tiny little province in the north side. So they, when they talk to me in the language, they mix it up. And so when I try to talk to other people, they're like, I have no idea what you're saying. That must be some other dialect that your parents know. So I'm just like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to learn this? And these different nuances. So that, the language is always around. But I remember when I was 14 and I did vacation there, and I was there for a few months, it was like osmosis.
Yeah.
I just picked up on it, because you've heard it all your life, but you never really speak it. But then all of a sudden, when you're there and you have to survive, it just, I knew exactly what they were saying, and then I started to piece together words, and so it's in me somewhere. But depends on which island, right? You know, I'm like, oh gosh, I'm confusing people. Only if it's around the Ilocanos. So the Ilocanos is the dialect or the kind of culture that my parents are considered. And I was like, Ilocano sounds a lot like Tejano. So I'm wondering, you know, I always wonder, I wonder if there's some kind of relation there. Old conquistadors and things from the island. But so that the cultural aspect around language, food, the religion, of course, go to church every day. So going to Catholic school, I went to church like 3 times a week.
Yeah.
So it was like church while with your class, church with the school, and then Sunday church with your family. So it's very much, you know, now I try to think if I'm a religious person today, and I always try to be open to my daughter going, if that's what you want to decide. But then I came to respect that there's something about ceremonies, you know, and respecting that. You know, even though you may not be a religious person, there's still a rite of passage that happens that I find are important. And so the friends that I have that don't want to get married, you know, I kind of wonder, you know, if that the concept of ceremony could just be, you know, is something that's been missed as we get into our generation now. So, or even my daughter, she's the one who actually told me, I want to do my first communion. And I go, do you even know what that means? You know, and she goes, well, my cousin so-and-so is doing it. Why can't I? And I'm like, well, you know, there's a lot that goes into that. Or, you know, so she actually made me reconnect back into the Catholic faith. Because I thought, oh, you know, I figure 8 years and then praying the rosary every day of my life when I was a child, I'm good for a while. And so my mom's like, you strayed away from the church. So that is very much a cultural aspect, I think, of Filipinos. One guy put it, well, you're just born a Catholic. You can change later, but you're just born it. Like they're just cradle Catholics, and so that's what the Spanish gave us, is that ingrainingness, you know, and then thinking back again, like the pilgrimage on the islands, and always the concept of giving in community, big families. That's another Filipino thing, big families, and you know, eating rice with everything. I mean, I can't think of anything else that could probably get you there. Karaoke, I don't know where that came from, but it started to become a huge thing in the family. And shame, that's a big concept. Yeah, you know, and not really being direct about. It's almost like Japanese as well. It's like, oh, they just walk in a room and they say, yeah, I think the room needs some cleaning, but they won't directly tell you to clean it. So you'll just feel this, you know, pressure of, I think the room needs to be cleaning. So it's this passive way of speaking, right? It's I can't quite explain it. So some of my friends tell me when I'm around my family, my diction and my language even changes. It starts to become very harmonious, like da 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 da. So I mean, even though I'm speaking English, my attonation starts to get acclimated to the family. It's like, your family has their own language, and I go, what are you talking about? We're speaking English. They're like, no. You sound like you're singing to each other, and I don't know what they're talking about. So, and then having lots of kids. I don't know why. I mean, like, I guess the Catholic faith kind of dictates that. It's always surrounded by children.
Right.
and a small gathering is 20 people. I mean, seriously.
Wow.
Always. Somebody asked me, why, how can you Filipinos afford these huge parties all the time? And I was like, it's potluck. All the time. It's always everybody just bring something over, and it's just 20 dishes instantly on the table. And I don't know why they don't have successful restaurants in Houston that are Filipino, but nobody makes it like your mama does, basically. Is what it comes down to, and the different regional aspects. So, I mean, definitely very driven by food. So, I don't know. Those are a lot of other things. I'm sure they'll come up. Oh, and work. Okay. Oh my gosh. They have no shame in telling each other the salaries of their children at the dinner table. So all the moms will gather around, right, at a party, and they'll just say, my son makes $100,000 a year. How much does your daughter make? Well, my daughter makes blah, blah, blah. They just, in usually American culture, you don't do that, but they just have no, they're just laying it out there because they're very competitive in that sense.
Right.
Respectfully, of course. And so the women are in the kitchen, and maybe like that in most cultures, and the men are in the garage, talking about God knows what. But there's a rite of passage that goes with that.
Yeah.
And so, when I intermarried, it became interesting.
Yeah. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Do your parents ever discuss some similarities between the influence of the Spanish culture in the Philippines and coming to Texas, where there's a large Hispanic influence as well?
They always go back to the language, right? There's the religious aspect of it, very similar. And then also they'll say, we didn't have a word for garbage in the Philippines until the Spanish came. And so it's the same word in Spanish, like basura, or the silverware, right? We didn't, or cigarettes, right? They didn't have no cigarettes.
Right.
So they're like, we didn't have cigarettes, silverware, and the word for garbage until they came. And so they'll bring that up, and then they'll have, even some aspects of the food like empanadas. Well, we have our own version of empanadas. So, ours might be slightly different, made from the different, Asianness ingredients that were around. But I also see it's definitely in like the Catholic bit. So I get along with my Hispanic friends. We tend to relate very well on some of those aspects, the machismo aspect, probably more so than Asian to Asian, right?
Yeah.
Right.
There is an integration of it, but I think it seems more that we relate a lot more with the Hispanics than we do with that. But then, we tend to still alter our ingredients, right, when we're here in cooking. Like, well, back home we had this thing, but, jalapeno will do.
Yeah.
We'll just put a jalapeno instead. Or it's like, well, it used to not have tomatoes in it, but pico de gallo has tomatoes in it. We'll add tomatoes. So they kind of start making these hybrid dishes, as a result of being Texan and here, and so I appreciate that. But I still have to figure out, A, how to cook the dishes, and B, what the recipe is, because it changes each time you ask.
Yeah.
A pinch of this, a pinch of that. Well, maybe some tablespoon I have in the kitchen I've been using for years. And you're like, well, how many? A stirring spoon is how much? So it's those type of things that we find that are similar. So it's very much integrated: language, religion, food. But it's definitely fusion on the food. I'd have to say. I mean, you have some aspects, but I don't know if I even look Mexican, like they said, but it's hard to say. No, but it's always meant endearingly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some people tell me I look Mexican. So
Yeah, I was like, I don't know, you could be a spy for all you know. You could go and be whatever you want wherever you go, because you have that, you're not sure what you're from or what you look like.
Yeah.
Use it to your advantage in whatever country that you're at. So I kind of view it like that. And then when I'm in Mexico, I notice that they have an easier time approaching me than they do other people. And they just start speaking Spanish to me, and I just kind of, try to respond in English to let them know, not quite completely fluent, but I know enough to, order a drink to my room. But I can survive. So, but it's very much integrated for sure. But we're like that. You want to say that we're, what's the word? That we're not muds, but we're kind of just this integration. We are an integration of these two cultures there in those islands, and so that's what brings about the uniqueness. But it also probably helped us relate when other countries came over, like the U.S. and stuff. But,
So essentially, your childhood was at the crux of three different cultures: the American, the Hispanic, and the Asian in some ways.
see, and I didn't even think about it like that because we did learn Spanish in elementary school, but then I always kept finding that a lot of the words were the same, zapatos and pantalones, so I pick up on some of it. But then, my parents are speaking, I jokingly say, like, Taglacano and Tanglish, because you're mixing it all together, and it's no wonder we have miscommunications sometimes. You're like sitting there going, Lord, which language are you thinking that one in? So, one of my godmothers is even Hispanic, so yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I didn't think of it that way. I guess we're sort of just hybrids and all of it together.
There's the word.
So yeah, that's the word.
Not much.
Right? Yeah. I couldn't think of it at the time. But it's definitely a much better placed word for the cross section.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it does bring about questions on how you learn to belong to growing up. Is it here or is it there? Do you have to choose?
So I guess as you were growing up, were your friends mostly Filipino or all kinds of different, or Hispanic, or just everyone? I guess maybe in high school.
So in private school, very small private school, you're stuck with the same 20 people for life, like 8 years, right? But it was a very diverse Catholic school in the middle of Houston. It was Corpus Christi Catholic School, and it was it's still around. It's off of Stella Link, and it was very diverse. It must have been, you had, Indian, Black, Hispanic, Asian, white. We were all, it was like, I don't know why that particular area was just so cross-sectional. So growing up, I guess my friends I tended to drift towards the ones that were very smart, and I didn't really discern culturally. There was maybe one Filipino girl, but she was not born and raised in Houston. So to an extent, we really didn't relate to some level.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, I apologize if anything that I'm saying is in bad taste, but seemingly as I grow up, I sometimes think that, gosh, I'm the whitest girl I know when it comes to the way I was raised. But then when I do come across other Filipinos, I'm like, hey, I can hang with the dishes because I bet you haven't had home cooking in a while because I can now. Why don't you come to my house? And, we'll have the vegetables in the garden and we'll get you going. So, but it also just looking around and the friends, it came down to the personality at the end of the day. You kind of, and maybe it's more evolved thinking for a 10-year-old at the time, right? Yeah. So, but a lot of the kids in the neighborhood were just that Filipino group of families. My parents did not cross that line culturally. I remember one guy put up some blinds. That's like the only different culture that they let him in the house. And another guy tried to sell him insurance, and another guy tried to sell him a water purifier. I remember those 3 instances. The only time we had different cultures allowed in the house, and I think 2 out of 3 of them got kicked out because they said something that my father didn't appreciate.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, he's very, unicultural, and I guess influencing me made me think that I had to be very discerning about people, but also respectful, especially if you're in somebody else's home, especially with my father. So you can't be too direct. You have to be respectful, but if you're coming across a very sensitive topic, you've got to be walking on eggshells culturally to make sure that it's not offensive, right? But then my father picks up on it pretty quick. So if you are trying to take one over on him, and it's just, I don't know, maybe that's a survival mechanism of being very suspicious and how you protect your children too.
So culturally, an individual's possessions are very important.
To me, it's mostly the family, right? Yeah. Your children, you're very, I guess you see all these shows on, kidnappings, and whatnot, and they're very suspicious about strangers being let into their community. and it does take a lot of time to gain trust, especially if you're from the outside in. But even then, though, my father, it's very easy to. It was always. I remember growing up, even the Filipino neighbor borrowed his tools and didn't return them, and so they never spoke again. And he worked with this guy, so it was just, it's just he's very just disciplined about the respect thing. He's like, you just cannot cross that integrity with him because he gives so much himself. If you're in good, it's like, come to my home, whatever. Hey, here's some vegetables. He opens his home to his brothers. He immigrates them all over. He brings them in. He pays for whatever they need in order to get them going. And so when you are in, they always say, like that movie, I can't remember the name of the movie, but he's like, you're in the circle of trust. It's very much like that. And I think about where they came from in the islands, and it's the same thing. Because they're in that isolated community that it takes a while to get into. And everyone knows everybody, and so there's this sort of, organizational consciousness that happens in there. And I think he kind of just reestablished that in the Houston community.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I can imagine there's probably different groups like that within even our own culture of where you trust your little hobble in the neighborhood. And that's how they survive, right? And they get community. And so, but growing up being American was tough sometimes because I think at an early age I was asked to be the interpreter. Can you talk to the people? Can you make the travel plans? Can you make sure that we have reservations? Can you, can you tell them that we're unhappy with our, service, and I'm just like, after a while, I'm like, oh, come on, it just became, but being the oldest of 5, I think after a while, I just kind of assumed spokesperson. So my grandmother, I would say that she practically raised me, because my parents were working all day long, engineer and nurse, right? And they came home, we carpooled, so we went to Corpus Christi, lived in Missouri City. My mom would pick us up from school. My mom would take us from the house and take us to medical center where the Catholic school was located. And then another one of the moms who lived in our area would then take me home to, brothers and sisters and all and their kid. And that's how we did it. We'd exchange duties that way. And so it was, just making sure you keep, and then grandmother was waiting at home because my parents were not there to receive us. My mother worked till midnight. And dad maybe came home about 6 or 7. And so until then, I guess between the hours of like 2 to 5, 6 or 7, grandmother ruled the roost. Yeah. And so so imagine being raised by yet another generation older. Yeah. She's old school, right? She wouldn't know grandma that make big cookies and happy to see you kind of thing. She made sure, and there were so many of us that, we did chores. Yeah. We watered the vegetables in the back. She had us marching in a line. We ate these exotic foods that we liked or didn't like. We cleaned the house. We did, she made sure we were occupied and kept track of each other. And it was always these, I remember her sayings like, you're the oldest, you have to set an example. You always got to set, and there's those different kind of things. Well, you have to make sure that your brother is safe. You have to make sure you can keep track. You have to do, I still even hear them today. So those are the kind of, I don't know if you were raised with grandparents or not either, but it's kind of it's like the same thing. It's like this different, it's very old. I was raised old school. So, there's some conservative views that I have, but but I try to take that in as a mother today.
Yeah.
Going, okay, there's a middle road here. I can't be all extreme. Because I'm a working mom, and grandmother, her life was us.
Yeah.
And so, that being said, though, it was, once we were grown, she moved to the next uncle's house who had kids and watched their kids. And once their kids were grown, she moved to the next uncle's house. But she raised the generation. The food, the cooking. She taught me how to crack an egg and fry it in a pan, So, then for myself even, so.
So did you go to Catholic school all the way through high school?
No, because if you recall, it was in high school. when we moved to the public school arena in the nicer
Okay, so
neighborhood
you
in
also
Sherwood.
moved to public school.
Right. So then my dad bought the better house
Mm-hmm.
in Sugarland and used all that money in private school to move us to a better neighborhood and to make room for all the 5 kids that were growing out of their shoes and needed space. And so that's where they are today. So
How old were you when you all moved?
it was in '87, so I had just graduated from high school. I mean, from junior high, so what, 13?
Okay.
13, 14, right around that time. But everyone else was 2 years below me.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So they had a completely different, probably, view of public school
Yeah.
at that time. So I was the only one who got to complete the full 8 in that atmosphere. So I can imagine it was probably a big change. I know it was a big change for them in that area. So, and then the weird thing is that at the time they bussed us over to a different school a little further down in I don't know if you know Clemens High School. Yeah, so we went to Clemens High School our first year because they didn't have enough room. It was like gangbusters. They were just blowing up neighborhoods at that time. And the year after that, they built another high school close to my parents' house. And so our class actually didn't even have a senior class. So it was, you're sort of like kings of the roost for like 2 years. So I was, there was a class above us that was the first graduating class, and I was the second graduating class of that high school. Yeah, so it was so even then when I transferred over, I was like, this is different because there's no 4 classes. It was just 2. And then as we progressed, so you were kind of ruling the school, really. You were like juniors and seniors for 2 years in a row, 3 years in a row. So it was definitely a different.
What school was that?
Kempner High School.
Okay.
I-H Kempner High School off of Voss
Right.
near Highway 6. So that they built that. We all joke that was on prison land. We're going to the prison school, and there were like these at the time, because they had just built it on the prison land. We'd all look out in the windows, and there'd be cows in the pastures, and we just so I headed up the yearbook, and I was like, gosh, there's nothing to take pictures of around here. I was like, well, I guess you could take a picture of that cow, and so that's what I did to stay entertained or get involved. So I always had a knack for that growing up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did your parents continue to instill the Catholic culture now that you were no longer in Catholic school?
That's hard. Well, we still had to go. I mean, even now, if I was living in my parents' house today, we will go to church. So we went to church every Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah, hands down. It didn't matter. Even when my brother, he still lives there today. When he got older, it didn't matter. It's like you going to church. And my dad even, he's like, well, I want to go fishing. So if I go to church on Saturday, can I go fishing on Sunday? I mean, you work it in.
Yeah.
Because my mom was like, you go. And then she started to join a group called the Holy Rosary Crusade. And so it was that group then that not only did you go to church on Sundays, but then you would party at other people's houses, but not until you did the novena and brought the giant 4-foot statue of Virgin Mary to their homes, because that's what the Holy Rosary Crusade does. You move the Virgin Mary from house to house, and then when you bring the Virgin Mary to that house, you pray, and then we all can eat. And so, so that was another way culturally. I remember growing up, there was always a huge statue in the house, and we were always moving the Virgin Mary to different houses. And so,
Wow.
so you want to talk about, instilling it still while I was there, but it wasn't until I moved out that I was like, whew, I need a break, And so I went to church, but not necessarily every Sunday. So did I stray? I'm always going to be a Catholic in my heart, and also culturally. So it's still in me. It's in me. It's a part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So. People always say, well, but the Catholic Church believes in this, that, or the other. So without making this a political conversation, I just always look at it as, there's going to be good and bad sides to every religion.
Great.
And, it's what you make of it. And for us, it's about the community,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's about what holds us together. And then it's like
the Catholic Church, that's probably their biggest marketing mechanism. They do the same mass all over the world.
Yeah.
And so even if you are uneducated, can't read, third world country, you can go from Rwanda to Houston and it's going to be the same mass.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest marketing tool. And there's something about common language that people can relate to anywhere that you go to. So that's one of our common languages. So whether I don't really know truly the dialect, I know that if I go to that little province town that my parents are from, there's going to be a church where I can, even though it might be in another language, Latin, even it'll be in Latin, I can follow exactly what's going on because I know exactly where we are in that part of the ceremony. And there's something to say to that about the strength in the community.
Yeah.
So,
I noticed on your form that you wrote about your first job at Fair City.
how embarrassing. I was like, God, I don't want to write this down. Okay, so maybe my first real job was babysitting at home.
Okay.
Yeah, but the first one on paper, if people were to go back on my taxes, yes.
Uh-huh.
It's called
What is Fair City?
it's called Funplex today.
Oh.
Wow.
Do you not know where that is?
Yes. I know.
Oh, embarrassing. So it's called Funplex, but it was Fame City back then, and they used to have a water park.
Oh.
And I think it's been dismantled. I don't think it's there. They completely revamped it. I
Yeah.
think it's like the #1 Twitter thing right now to go roller skating there. Or something.
Right.
That's what I heard. And I was like, my niece is going there, and I'm like, oh Lord, that place is still around. But yeah, so I did not know how to swim, and so all my friends worked at the water park, and I wanted to work at the water park too, and so I ended up flipping burgers.
Oh.
At the food and beverage concession stand because I wanted to hang out with my friends.
Yeah.
Of course, they all had the glamorous lifeguard style, and but I didn't care. I was having a good time, and when I wanted an official job on the record to just document that I'm doing something to earn because my dad bought me a car. So being in Sugar Land, I got my first car. It was a Mitsubishi Galant, but I had to pay for the gas and I had to pay for all these other things and. And I was eager to work. And, if I don't know if you recall that age, but you are just dying to get out of the house.
Yeah.
And if you get a car, thank God I don't have to do the Yellow Submarine anymore. So you're just ready to just get off the bus into a car and just be grown up as fast as you can.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was mentally at the time. Just
Okay.
trying to. And so Fame City was the job that I decided to apply for because I had heard a rumor that the guy who was hiring, all the tricks to get hired. So they were telling me, okay, this guy, he's kind of mean, but but be nice to him, and then he'll probably, just answer the questions like so and so. I'm sure you'll get the job. My mom, this one guy's like, my mom runs the food and beverage stand. If you have an issue, just mention her name. So it's like this name dropping even back then.
Wow.
She's running it. Believe me, she'll put in a good word for you. And so that's how you get hired even today, right? Word of mouth sometimes, even though there's a formality, but it helps.
How much were you making?
Oh my
at
God,
that job?
I was minimum wage back then, so $3. Nothing.
Yeah.
$3, and then and I'd get excited if we got a 25-cent raise. I'm like, woohoo! But because back then you could probably go to Contempo Casuals and get yourself something between, for $20, you could get like 4 tank tops for that much. Right? I just remember, the priorities that you have as a kid.
Yeah.
Maybe, but if I roll it back even further, the only way we made money as kids growing up was, besides helping my grandmother to babysit, because she watched everybody's kids at the house, was she paid us 25 cents an hour to pull weeds. So she had her own, I was like, I was the oldest of 5 in the pecking order, so I would get my shift of brothers and sisters to go. If you pull the weeds, I'll buy us some candy at the store. And I'm saving my 25 cents an hour. But she kept it tight. So, a quarter could go a long way back then, I guess, with the ice cream man. If we all collectively make, 75 cents, we can chase down the ice cream man later. And it was not. I don't see how, I don't see how we survived on that. But you made it work. You don't think about it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You don't think about it when that's all you have to work with. So it's not much much at all. Well, this is a story about labor and commerce. There was a lot of labor. There was not a lot of commerce.
That is too funny.
I know. So.
Okay, so how about college? Did you go right after you graduated?
I did. Okay, so that's an interesting story too. Yes, I did. I wanted to go to UT.
Okay.
Okay. And I actually got accepted.
Okay.
Probationary. I was very involved in high school. And so they were excited to see that. And so I was like, I don't know, 80th in my class. I was like magna or cum laude. And, I lost motivation, I think, in high school when my father said, you need to stay home and help me with the kids. And I was like, no! I was so ready to just change my hair and wardrobe and move and start a new life. But he basically laid it down for me. He's like, we don't have enough money to send you there, and I need your help here. Mm-hmm. And so, what's a dutiful eldest daughter to do with that information? And back then, I didn't have an understanding of student loans and the scholarships I could have applied for. I mean, the only advice that a counselor could give me going, well, there's some books on that shelf over there if you could figure, I don't know, maybe it's the same today. Go figure it out.
If you're at a public school, it's the same.
Yeah. I was just kind of like, okay, and I'm like, well, I might apply. So there wasn't much mentoring and guidance.
Yeah. If you had stayed at the Catholic school, maybe.
I know, probably. I would have had connections. But I remember at my senior year, because I was editor of the yearbook for 2 years, and that was a big deal for me because I was in charge of seniors too. And then we had won all these awards at A&M for #1 in layout or theme for our yearbook. So it was a big deal for me. I learned actually a lot about governance running those teams. And the principal he adored me. And he's like, any school, I've got connections up north. Which one do you want to go to? And I was like, I'm kind of stuck to go to university at home because of my situation. He was so disappointed. Because he said, I can open whatever door you need because I'm a principal and my son and my family were ingrained in, and he just thought he could totally make this happen for me. And I think back on those decisions, and if I had probably helped my father to understand it or maybe even relayed to him my dilemma with financials, he probably would have helped me. I didn't know at that age the questions to ask or what to do. You don't, I just think about that lack of that part of our education when growing up. It was just sort of,
And being the oldest, you had no older sibling.
I know. I was just kind of stuck. So my life would have been completely different, I'm sure, if I had kind of gone, Mr. Emerson, do what you may. I am your mud and your clay. Make me as I be. So I could have done something. But the choice was at the time because hierarchy of family. That's my priority. So I chose family, and I said, my dad said, I got to stay home. So at that point, then I stopped trying at school because I was like, well, I'm already cum laude, and you already locked in our GPA, so I'm going to university at home. So that, I did go to college immediately after. And after the first year, it was discovered that my father couldn't pay for me in college, and then my brothers and sisters were all going through adolescence at the same time. All 4 of them were in their teens.
Oh, gosh.
So what goes with growing pains? Wrecked cars, other delinquent activities, getting in trouble, and he was just like, I can't afford to send you to college now, even at University of Houston. And so I decided to get a job, on my own, and I was like, well, and then I had heard that waiting tables could give you the maximum amount of money in the minimum amount of time.
Okay.
And I was like, well, how much do you, so this girl who I went to high school with, who I guess I kind of knew from Penn City, was like, hey, I'm getting a job as a hostess, and it makes more than $3 an hour. And I was like, really? Well, how much are you making? God, she's like, for a hostess, just to say hi to people at a door, it's $5 an hour. And that's all I have to do. I was like, $5 an hour. I can do $5 an hour. I was so excited. You just got to look good and say hi to people and seat them. That's it. I said, I can do that. So, and I worked. So I worked my way. I said, okay. Finally, when I got there and I saw how much money the waiters were making, and it was a restaurant called the Atchafalaya River Cafe.
Okay.
And it's not there anymore, but it was on Fondren and Westheimer. Okay, Landry's is there now
Right.
because Tillman Fertitta bought it. I remember the day he bought it too. But it was owned by Rio Star Corporation, which is NEPA's.
Okay.
Okay, but then before that, there was a guy named Dick Tannenbaum, and he had actually. Do you know him? Have you heard of him? He's known as the restaurant starter, and he had started that restaurant, and I can't remember what he coined it off at. I know Papa's coined Bell. Papa Dough coined their idea and made it a better concept because they're still around today. But the Atchafalaya River Cafe, when it first opened up on Fondren, it was a different recipe on the wall, depending on what the chef felt like writing on the chalkboard. That was how crazy it was there, and it was Mardi Gras every day.
Wow.
And I was like, because that's what you do. Your waiter outfit is, you think about that horrid movie Waiting. It was just like that, right? It was the culture and everything. Probably the best time of my life, I have to say. and struggling so much. But I learned a lot about relationships and customer service and people and profiling them, And then in a Cajun restaurant, it's, you're being managed by the Boudreaux and the Thibodeaux. And then and then the Lorenzo family, the Lorenzos, the Tomasinos and all. Anyways, all that whole entourage, they were all there. And you were instantly injected into the restaurant politics of Houston. So and it still goes on today, I'm sure,
Yeah.
because we're the foodie kind of town. But back then, it was so exciting to me. I was like, wow, that waiter just made that. What was it? He had $100 night. And I was like, if I had $300 nights a week, I could live on my own.
Yeah.
So I was like, I want to wait tables. And then I could just go to school the rest of the other time. And so I was thinking that, you're doing the math in your head on how you would make it, and because I was not lucky enough to get the money just given to me by my father. And I was like, I want to do this. So that's what I ended up doing and for a while to go to make my way through college. And I moved out as soon as I could, just so I could live near where I worked and could go to school at the same time because the traffic from Sugarland to U of H is. I was like, gosh, I just spent half my money on gas.
Right.
Yeah.
So even back then, I was like, I want to come into the university with a calm spirit, and traffic is not doing it for me. So I instantly decided to move into the Montrose area, where I got a little apartment and just it was cheap back then and waited tables, and that's how I got in to college.
Wow.
So.
How did you choose your major?
Well, so I said I was editor of the yearbook, right? And I had actually even been editor of the yearbook in junior high.
Okay.
So I'd always had a knack
Yeah.
for getting a bunch of artists in a room to create something. So that was my gift. So I thought I'd join the graphic design program.
Okay.
And then when I did some research, I was like, gosh, artists don't make that much. I was like, the amount of money I just spent on art supplies and the amount of money I'm going to make when I get out, I was like, this is not... so that reality was so hard for me, right? And then at the same time, I wanted to do journalism. And because my dad was like, you're going to be the next Connie Chung. I don't know if you know who Connie Chung is,
Yeah.
but she's married to Maury Povich. Back then, she was the Asian journalist. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to be Connie Chung. And then I was like, ooh, Connie Chung didn't make much when she started. So I was, I'm torn between honoring my true self and my gift and then going the lifestyle I think I want to lead, and the burden of knowing I'm the oldest of 5 kids and this big family where money is always an issue. So my father, growing up, he's like, you can't have that because I can't pay for it. And I'm just like, that was my driver, I think, that burned into me going, well, then I'll pay for it myself. And I'll figure it out. So that my major then was later determined, let's see, pharmacy school for a semester, optometry school, architecture school. So I was your typical lost child.
Okay.
I was not a driven and very focused person. It was just the reality of knowing what my gift was. You always think, gosh, what do I want to have written on my gravestone? I'm like, darn, I don't think I can afford my gravestone on this guy. So I'm just going, God, I want to be known for these things. How do I make it happen? So I decided to go to the University of Houston downtown, where I didn't have to pick a major. I thought, I said, I think I'm just going to go into business. Or I think I was like, everybody needs to know computers, I said to myself, because computers is like math. You just got to know it, right? That's what I always thought, because I always had a knack for that, doing the layouts in the editor jobs. I could whip together, photographs and all that into a design. And I was like, that's just more computer. I could do this. So this was before the internet boom happened.
Oh.
So I luckily, by not making a choice, made the right choice,
Yeah.
right? So I graduated with so while I was in college, I was like, oh, waiting tables is tough on your body and soul, because then you have to, you work late hours and then you go to 8 a.m. class. So I was like, well, this is tough, and I don't want to skip any classes, so I'll just work at the school. That way I have to go to school. So I took a job as the editor of the University of Houston Downtown newspaper.
Okay.
And I was a business major in computer information systems, and they did not like that. I got the job for that role because they wanted a professional writer in that role. So each of the professors kind of were like, I want my star students to take that internship role because they could probably get more out of it. But I approached it. I was like, I actually have skills in this. And so, when I walked in the room, like I told you, I was editor, junior high, high school, and won all those awards. And then I took some graphic design courses even. And what I didn't tell you is I was also on the yearbook my freshman year. Okay, so I was already an editor of not really the best section. Nobody wanted it. Of course, I was the first academic section. Boring. But I got to interview the guy who does electromagnetic energy research over in U of H. And so, but that was the academic side. They're like, it's not sports, it's not sororities or fraternities or glamorous, but it was something. It was a job that I had at U of H Central. And so I said, okay, I can do this. I can do a job at this university. And then when they came in for my interview, they're like, you're a business major, what do you know? And I was like, boom, on the table.
Everything out.
I was like, here's my portfolio. And all I know is, and if I'm not allowed to probably cuss on this, but I'm sorry. The professional writers in the program were quite angry that I had taken the slot from them, and so I became known as the bee who came out of nowhere who didn't know nothing.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was like, you know what? Controversy. That's what I like on a newspaper. So bring it on. And that's fine, right? Because I've seen it. I've seen drama. I was a waitress, for God's sake.
Yeah.
So that's what I did, and then actually paid well, because because it's not taxable because it's considered, I guess, the way it was structured in the pay. You just get a stipend. It was just bottom line.
Nice.
If we're going to pay you that much, is what you get on your check. And so that worked out for me through college, and so the major. Non-deciding on the major became that.
Yeah.
So my fate was written in that way. So I said, I'm going to integrate my talent in whatever it is that I do, because it's who I am. But I'm going to try to make some money here because I got to live.
Yeah.
So it was trying to find the best of those two worlds, and that's how I decided my major, by not deciding on my major.
So, were you able, I guess you were working all the time, but did you have time to be involved in any kind of student organizations or
Social
clubs?
kind.
Well,
Sleep?
what I don't mention in between is that, so I lived on my own, and, I had met a waiter. And so to augment my finances, we lived together.
Yeah.
And he ended up being my business manager.
Oh.
I got him hired on because he was a business manager as well. And our entourage on the paper was basically our social life. And so what I don't tell you is what that's like, working on a paper in college. And at the time, my assistant editor, she was very crafty in marketing. And she got us into, what you do on a paper is if you can get, so if you're going to review a movie, for instance, and you can link up with a movie a marketing company who's, say, sponsoring that movie in Houston, you get free tickets.
Mm-hmm.
So I get free tickets to Miss Saigon because Allen Theater wanted the captured audience of the university, and they wanted you to write an article on it and get a preview before it even comes out.
Yeah.
So here's some free tickets at Roll Call. Preview it, write it, have your entire audience at university see your captured audience of 8,000 people see exactly what it's like, and then if you send me the newspaper article back and how many people you reached, they then reach their numbers on their research, on their captive audience. That's how it works. Okay, so working on the paper, I learned a little bit about that. So one of the famous people I got to interview was Angelina Jolie.
Wow.
So I had a social life. You know, we were good. Life was good. And at the time, she wasn't famous, and it was another guy that was with her, Johnny Lee Miller. And they weren't married yet. It was her first husband. But they were doing, ironically, a movie called Hackers. And we are about the same age. So I'll tell you, I think it was MGM who was sponsoring the movie. And we didn't know anything about the movie. We asked him some key questions, but because we were the same age, we ended up talking about everything but the movie. And so we had sort of commandeered their time for 3 hours at the Ritz-Carlton. And there were like a line of journalists outside the door going, when is this going to be done? And they didn't dare not disturb us to stop it. But we were just a bunch of kids just then talking. And I remember the article came out horrible. I mean, it was questions like, did they teach you how to type? You know, because, in a Hackers movie, you're pretending to type away. I was like, what else did they do? It was just horrible article, but we didn't care, so.
You got to talk to me.
I think now, and I didn't know she was ever going to be famous, and she told me a lot of things about, she said she wished she had been a model. Back then, she was wearing glasses and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and so she looked like any other girl just crossing the street, so I didn't think anything of it. And we were just having a good time. I was like, I got to stay for a marketing exam, so I'm going to put my assistant editor to interview you. I'm going to go to the back room and read my marketing book. So I'd come in every now and then. I'm going, can I eat your chocolate on your pillow? And then I come in, and they go, oh, yeah. What are you studying? And we'd all just joke. It was just really that kind of conversation. It was a bunch of kids.
Oh my gosh.
But that's how I integrated social life, right? I mean, it was through my work.
Wow.
So yeah, and then one of my friends, he wasn't a friend at the time, but one of the writers, he would get albums from companies to review. Back then, they would send albums, not CDs. Right? And he was a inspiring DJ at the time, and so he was like, "How can I milk this?" So he would get the album, and he'd be like, "Oh, I just interviewed some guy in this band that's up and coming called the Wu-Tang Clan," or something like that. And they weren't famous back then. Or Ludacris. Well, you want this Ludacris sticker? So it's just very much about these. Or Gregory Nava, this director is doing a session at U of H downtown. His name's Gregory Nava, and he directed the Selena story. And at the time, it was a very Mexican college, so they were just crazy about this director. We've decided that we are going to choose a young girl who's not Mexican to star as Selena. Boo, hiss, right? And of course it was Jennifer Lopez, and they did not want her to portray her, and so it was funny. Getting that guy there. It was just, so it was exciting. You make what you do, and you surround yourself with very interesting people. And I was involved also in the Association for Information Technology Professionals. I became president of that. So, because I lived and worked at the school, it became your life, and that is your social life too. And so, yeah. I don't know if you guys do that as well. Maybe I'll have a life outside of school.
Not really.
No.
But see, I still remember those as some of the best years of my life. you know? So, and it stays with you. Because even some of the connections today have come back to me going, hey, I'm running a nonprofit. Can you help me out with this, that? So we still stay strong because, a lot of who we are gets, I don't know, it's the same from back then. So that's what it's like growing up in Houston for me. So you make it work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, what did you do after you graduated?
What did I do after I graduated? So there's a couple things happened that were transitionary before I graduated. I got a scholarship. So again, right, the professors are just loving me, right, because I'm involved and I'm heading up their organizations. I made good grades. I was on the dean's list. And they're like, well, I was also part of this other group called Students in Free Enterprise. And a couple of the students there had actually got hired into Shell Oil Company. And then at the same time, this one professor was like, why don't you apply for this particular scholarship with the Texas Business Hall of Fame? And I walk in, and ironically, the guy interviewing me was a Rice graduate too. But he was actually, I don't remember, forgive me, I don't know his name right now, but he was a well-established business person at that point and wanted to see how I would someday, make it, and why should I get the scholarship? And I remember saying, I want to own a magazine someday. And he goes, and plus I'm going to be working for Shell Oil Company. So he was impressed with the fact that I wanted to work for Shell, I had started to be interviewing with Shell at the time. But at the same time, he was like, Shell's a tough company to move up in, so I don't know if you'll make VP anytime soon, young lady. And I was like, excuse me, is that a challenge? And then at the same time, he goes, although I think you'll probably get that magazine before you get that job, before you get that leadership role. Maybe he's right. He goes, but that's inspiring and aspiring. And so because I was able to articulate that and basically say, it's just my gift, it's what I've always had. You can give me whatever job, but that's my talent. And so something I said bought me that scholarship, and so I got to get that scholarship. And so the scholarship was for an MBA. So I was gonna think I was gonna take a break from school, but I was like, I've got the scholarship now. So I won the scholarship. I thought I was gonna lose it to some other girl.
Yeah.
They were like, no, hands down, you got it. And I'm like, oh. But that means I got to go to school again still. I thought I graduated. I thought I was going to take a break. And they were like, yeah, you got to go get the MBA now. And I'm like, okay. And so what had happened was then I went to, I was interviewing for Shell, I want to say that fall. So a friend of mine no, I take it back. That summer, before I graduated, I got a job with the Houston Chronicle as an IT person. But, and I don't know if you know about the Houston Chronicle back then, but they were using a mainframe system that was just 10 years even older, outdated from back then. So it was a lot of this just hardcore programming. And it was, to me, like, I had this other talent, and I got to watch the glamorous writers who were interns, could do all the fun stuff, and I'm just sitting here on COBOL programming. Looking at a black screen with green letters, because they didn't have, there was one PC that actually had internet on it, and even though it was a dial-up modem, so, I know, so this is how dated it was. And it was really tough that summer. And I was like, if I ever get a job, I'm going to tell them I will not do this. And I'm like, how did I get this job, first of all? And it was just, I had an answer for everything, and I had just taken a test, and so she quizzed me on programming questions, and I knew all the answers. But I was so nervous, but I got the job. But then when I actually had to do the job, I was like, I think I'm going to shoot myself because this is so hard. I like it to the extent of but programming was just not who I was. I'm more bigger picture than this. But I did it. I suffered through it, and gosh darn it, I made it, and I delivered. Yeah. But I knew what I was like, I know what I'm not going to be when I grow up. So, and so that helped me in my interviews at Shell. And actually, before I started interviewing at Shell, they came on campus, and they never go to that campus. University of Houston downtown. Who goes there? And I say it like that because I don't know, another comedian, his name was Carlos Mencia. Before he was famous, I don't know if you heard of him? Mm-hmm. You've heard of him. Mm-hmm. Okay, he was in Comedy Central recently, but back then when he was just a starving comedian, he came in and he was like, I thought I was going to the university that Akeem Olajuwon graduated from. I didn't know I was going to go to University of Houston downtown. Because I was escorted by the police. I thought I was because the prisons are right there. I thought y'all were going to take me to the jail. And so that was my, we were just laughing because I was like, couldn't believe I got this private audience of a comedian moment. And he would pick on me. He goes, you're Filipino, right? And I go, yeah. And he goes, everyone, you look at her because in the future we all going to look like Filipinos because it's cross-cultural, God knows what. You got Chinese, you got Spanish, you got whatever in you. And he's like, we're all going to look like that in the future. You see that girl right there? And he'd make fun of me the entire time. Where are you from? Where are you from? But that's, if you know Carlos Mencia, his stint is cultural comedy. Make fun of yourself, and that's how we all get along, kind of thing. So I say U of H downtown. So they came down, and I was like, gosh, Shell never interviews here. And so the career counselor, she was calling up names to interview, and I did not want to. And at the time, oil companies were going through scrutiny. I don't know if you've heard of it. At the time, there was a Texaco.
Yep.
Right.
There was a jelly bean jar with different colors, and there was a conversation recorded upon which the jelly beans were being racial derogatory references. The black jelly bean, the white jelly bean, the red jelly bean, yellow jelly bean, right? So I was like, I don't want to work for a big fat oil company where they're going to, I'm already going to be discriminated like that. So that was, my idealistic view of the world back then. And so the boyfriend I had at the time signed me up for interviews and didn't tell me. And so I was like, and so I think about 100 or so people signed up for those interviews, and I made the cut out of 10. And he tells me the next day, well, you made the cut, what have you got to lose? He goes, this is a sought after position, and you can just show up in your heels tomorrow in your suit. I was like, I don't own any suits. I'm going to go buy one. I have college.
Yeah.
I have no business attire. So he's like, show up in your pumps tomorrow. And I'm like, okay. I go, well, fine. Yeah, what have I got to lose? It's good to practice interviewing. Who wants to work for a big fat oil company anyways? And that was my attitude. It's like, I want to go back and be a designer, which is what I was meant to do, and maybe if the oil company will hire me on as a designer. I want to somehow integrate that part of who I was with the IT aspect. How do I do that? So I go interview with Shell, and gosh, they had their ducks in a row too, because they had a CD, right? Back then, nobody has CDs. They had a CD in a case with a beautiful cover on it called The Transformation Journey. And they catered to diversity in their recruiting program. They had their act together because they knew. So the first thing I was going to ask, you got some jelly beans in the room? So tell me about this jelly bean position you have. So I was just not happy because, I was the president of the Technology Association at the time, and I was in, I was in a position where I thought I could scrutinize. I just wanted a scholarship. I was like, what do you got to sell me at that point? And so they had interviewed back in the fall of the year before I graduated, which was in 97. So it was in 96. And they were like, well, they rolled it out. They were going through this transformation journey. We're making a diverse group, and these are the things that we're going to do. We're going to globalize. And I was like, wow. They wowed me, right? They had a CD-ROM. Ooh, you play this. They didn't even play it for me. I go, here's the CD-ROM about our transformation journey. And I was like, wow, you have a CD-ROM. Not a floppy disk, and it had a sticker on it, and it was just looking all sleek and professional. And she goes, well, we'd like to invite you to another interview on site. So I was like, okay, I guess, what have I got to lose? So I was very casual with her and just told it like it was. And that was in itself impressed her, surprisingly. Can you believe that? This position that I didn't even want to go to the interview.
Yeah.
Somebody else signs me. It was like fate, right? Laying its cards out. And it was my cavalier response that impressed them because I didn't have an interest. And so I go to this interview, and the next thing I know, it's like, January, right now the second interview takes place. They give me I'm interviewing with like 7 people. It's like this is the longest interview I've ever been on, and how many more people am I going to meet? And they're like, well, we really like you. We think you're great. Da, da, da. And this lady gives, she gives me, she goes, why don't you pick a day when you want to say yes? I mean, they made it that open-ended in January.
Wow.
This was I'm telling you, the internet boom had just started. And Shell was just trying to figure out what their place in the market for that. And so they were doing mass hiring at the time. And after they had laid off just massive amounts of people a decade before because of the oil crash, and there was like, as one person put it, there was just blood in the streets of the real estate going down and people losing jobs. The first time that companies had started to lay people off ever, right? Because usually they were like, I'm getting my gold watch, I'm going to be here 50 years.
Yeah.
And so, but this wasn't happening. And so I guess they came to their senses like, oh my gosh, we don't have enough staff with this internet boom thing that's happening. How can we capitalize on it? And so these new graduates were just we were being hired in at 40 at a time. I mean, just huge batches. And so class of 97, I'm just remembering all the people that got hired in at the same time. So, I was a dime a dozen really at the time, but they were like going, but she looks good on paper. She was involved in school. She made the dean's list several times. She was head of her technology association. She got a scholarship, pursued her MBA, and then they offered to pay for my MBA at that point. They were like, oh, it's part of our program. We'll just go ahead and fund it. So after your scholarship is done, so I finally figured out, like, oh, that's how you do it. You get the job, and then the company funds your other degree. Oh, okay. So I was starting to figure out the system. But then I was like, I want to get I'll tell you, I didn't want to tell them I was eager to get the job. I was like, how much are you offering? I was like, oh, dear. That's more money I've ever seen in my life. It's more than I was making a stipend per month at that paper at the school. You try not to look all nervous, like, that's a nice number. So what you do is like, well, tell me when you're ready to say yes or no, or give me an answer, any kind of which way it's going to go. I go, it's January. I really should probably interview around. I said, I'll give you an answer on the Ides of March, is what I told them. I remember saying that.
Oh my God.
I know, on the Ides of March, so we won't forget. And she's like, okay, whatever you wanted. So she typed up some email, sent it off. That was done with my interview. But did I look around? I did a little bit, and I asked other friends what they were being offered, and that was Shell's strategy at the time, is they over-offered so that they could beat out competition.
Wow.
So I was like, oh, they only offered you that much. I'm looking back on my offer paper going, that's not the same amount. I was like, should I even bother going to that company now and interviewing, knowing that person is my same caliber, and it's a similar start job? And I go around, well, you got a job with Exxon, how much you get? Well, you got a job with that one. Much. So after a while, I was like, I'm not going to go. I was like, I think I got it good. So I started with them, and that's how I got that job. And then not soon after, I started my MBA. And
So you worked concurrently while doing your MBA.
yes, and when I don't know about you haven't graduated, but me, I don't know if y'all are in the program or where you are in life, but I thought I could be CEO in 3 months or something, and I think we all think that when we first start our job, because you understand all the business cases, all the theory around things, but I had to be schooled on politics for sure, and I still am. It's still a different arena of learning that, especially in Houston and in the oil business.
Definitely.
I mean, if I could give the gift back to the folks going through school, it would be to learn how to network. And strategically, not just with anybody, right? So it's just how important. It's just as much as an organic problem as maybe the lack of proper courses like how to balance your checkbook. I think they should also teach other kids how to do your laundry. I mean, those are all equally important things, because if I had a dime for every time I met somebody who didn't know how to cook rice, I mean, that was when I was growing up, right? And you're Asian. That was always the test on dating. I was like, can he cook a pot of rice by himself? And it was a quick filter out. No, sorry. Can you cook rice? It's so fundamental, right?
Yeah.
So, cook rice. It's a good test on a judge of character for me. But just living on your own. And so I was living on my own, right? And so I was working and also going to school then as well.
Was that a tough lifestyle at that time?
Not with the money that Shell was paying me.
No.
So you're single, and you always want the jobs that let you travel when you first started a company. But you got to earn that. And I don't know what it was, but not until I got married and started having kids, they were like, okay, now you can travel. I'm like, what?
I don't want to travel anymore.
I can't travel now. So, thank goodness I got an understanding husband and the whole work-life balance thing, and a huge family in Houston is what helps. So they could all sort of, it's like it takes a village. It definitely does. So, being a working mom, I went to my class reunion recently. 20 years, right? God, I feel so old when I say that. But I went back in there, there's very few people who became engineers or went beyond being just a teacher outside of the neighborhood. And so I couldn't relate with many of them on how's that working mom problem that you've got, who's your nanny? I can't have those conversations. But they do get summers off, so I hand it to them on that, those being teachers. But it's definitely, and I do that now. I'm very active on those type of topics. So the bamboo ceiling, much less the glass ceiling, is definitely something I hit. So, and that's a humbling moment for anybody, I think, is learning how to play that. And you constantly are still battling that today. But enough talking. I'll let you ask more questions. So,
So when did you complete your MBA?
I completed my MBA in 2000. I want to say it was 03. So that's a gap of time, right? 5 years. So what happened was, okay, now you're getting deep with me now because you're pulling up another question that has been a struggle for me. Okay, so I graduated in 97, right?
Right.
So I get hired. So I get this job. Then after that, I get into the MBA and I'm like, oh my God, I got to take economics again. It's the same classes I took as an undergrad, pretty much. I mean, no, it was University of St. Thomas, very esteemed school, but you still had to go through the motions of the same courses. I'm like, this is the same class. So I was like, you know what? My calling is in this other industry. So how can I make it work? So like I said, the internet boom was happening. I was like, I'll do multimedia and web design. So University of St. Thomas doesn't have that as a degree. So I was like, Shell said they'd pay for relevant courses, and I think Art Institute qualifies, so they paid for that.
Oh, okay.
So I said, so I took a deviation into a 2-year certificate program, associates, just to get it out of my system, because people always say, Christy, did you sell out? And I never want to say that I did that, because I really wanted to stay honorable to my talents. And I took that, and I was thinking maybe I could go start my own business or do something on the side. But what I ended up doing in the company is I helped with the newsletters on the side as a volunteer basis. But it also refined my ability in presentation.
Yeah.
So, and then programmers couldn't get one on over and on me.
Right.
When they try to do things that I was like, it's spaghetti code. I know this trick. You haven't, got your, so that's what I do now, right? It's kind of keeping controls in check for IT people. But so I took the sidestep into the associates.
Where was that?
The Art Institute.
It's called the Art Institute.
Yeah, the
Art
Art
Institute.
Institute. Yeah. It actually was located in the Galleria area. I think they moved to a bigger building off of Highway 59 now.
Okay.
And so I got a certificate in multimedia web design, Dean's List, loved it. Learned how to make movies and animations and all those types of things.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I kind of have that. So I got it out of my system.
Yeah.
I was like, but then I was like, but I can never leave business unfinished. So I was like, I gotta go back. And so at that time, I went back to University of St. Thomas and finished it up. And luckily at the time there were some colleagues who were going there, kind of made it easier, but then there's some professors that were really inspiring. And the way I viewed education at the time was a little different then. So I started to go, I'm actually enjoying myself at school because I can now bring in work experiences, business cases into the classrooms. And at the time, Enron had crashed. So all of the ex-Enronians were in my classes looking for a job. So they're like, well, I don't have no job anymore. I can just go to school and hopefully if I get my MBA, I can just forget that whole Enron thing happened on my resume and just do my MBA. So, yeah. So then the business cases they brought into the classroom were very interesting conversations.
Yeah, I bet.
So it was an exciting time. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Have we exceeded time? I'm sure we have.
No. How?
Okay.
I mean, there's no time limit.
I know.
It's just like,
It's a lot of fun.
oh, okay. I guess so. When you first started at Shell, what exactly were you doing?
I was a support analyst. I believe that was my title. And the thing that I was doing was supporting an application called the Reformulated Gas Tracker. And what it did was, at the refineries, you're only allowed to produce a certain amount of chemicals that are pollutants to the atmosphere. And within government the EPA regulation. So they have to measure each quarter where they are at their levels. And so they take an averaging, like any statistics, on where they are. Have they reached their threshold for the year? That's at the maximum profitable area.
Oh, okay.
So we would always run the numbers to find out how much of the pollutants were being produced at like Deer Park, Deer Park Refinery. We always say that smell out there is the smell of money, and that cloud out there. Because I remember I would hang out with the engineers. I thought it was so cool that the engineers, because they tried to teach me about what it was that they were trying to track in the air. There's too many aromatics. There's too many of this. And then we'd sit there and we'd look outside in the sky from this place called the Information Center off of the Old Spanish Trail, and they go, "You see that color in the sky? They've produced way too much such and such chemical." And I'd be fascinated. It's like the Discovery Channel.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? And I go, so my report comes up with these numbers that helps you to calibrate how much of those pollutants you have to report to the EPA. And we were audited like often.
Yeah.
The lawyers were in there all the time going, "Show me how you came up with your numbers. Show me your calculations. Show me the formula that derived that." So I was like, I was supporting a lady that did it, and eventually I took it over. And then that's what I did when I first started. Yeah, so it was kind of, I was like, "Do you trust me with this information?" So that's kind of where.
And you've been working at Shell ever since.
And the funny thing about working for Shell is that it's such a big company. You could change careers like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I started off in kind of just doing bottom feeder work in the analyst area. So you start off in support. And then when I walked in on the interview, and first thing I said was, you will not find me of any value doing coding all day long. Because I remember that from the Chronicle. I go, "I am not a good developer. I'm only good at this." And they go, "Well, then you'll be good at support, which means you only need to know a little bit of code. But you got to troubleshoot the exact point in that code where
So
it's going
problem
wrong."
solving.
Problem solving, people solving. I mean, I always compare it to like, what is it? The stages of denial. Because whenever a customer calls and they're upset, this is the first help desks, right? Back and you always hear about help desks, and it's all true. They all call and they're angry at first. That's the first step, right? And then they go through depression and denial and all those steps of acceptance on the phone. How can I help you? Where you got to talk them down to finally articulate the problem. Finally, they're in acceptance and problem solving and move on. But you got to. For every call you get, you never know what you're going to get on the line. And these were folks from the refineries, and they didn't care who you were. They just wanted you to fix the problem.
Yeah.
And they just told it like it is. They would cuss. They didn't care. So yeah. So that was the first job, right? And so then it evolved to a different role. It was a change. So the companies like to reorg every few years. I don't know if y'all know that, but. Every time you get a crew change in leadership, they always want to redo what's going on and their personal agendas. Like, we're going to redo it all because it's all wrong. And at the time, the company was called Shell Services Company, and that's when they were trying to see if they could sell their own internet. I think they were even going into telecom.
Really?
They were like, we're going to create our own little apps and bring that out to the industry. Because it was just a market out there. It was unregulated, and every man or woman for himself. If you could come up with an idea at that time, because it was gangbusters, right? And so I figured out databases and code, and we would just develop things and just bring, mine is the best practice in the industry. First, let's get the buy-in on all the Shell, and then we'll get buy-in on all the other oil companies. I mean, that was the idea of the business model. But then something happened at the turn. We reorganized, and there was a crisis. First one was in the reserves. I don't know if you heard about that in our company. They used to be this governing board of like several people, and then the reserve crisis happens. And what the reserve crisis was accounting for your oil, right? If you could not account, you had to show it in your paperwork. Like, if I said that there's so many reserves in such and such country, it better say that on your paperwork. But if you over-report and it doesn't exist, then you're putting one over on the market, and you're basically lying. And we're going to bring you down, and you can bring your stock down, and your shareholders with you. So that kind of happened.
When was that?
It was about the turn of the century, right? 99, 2000, and then also what else happened at that time? We called it the year 2000 problem.
Yeah. The Y2K.
The Y2K issue. So they were like, okay, Christy, we need you to do this thing called the VM Exodus, right? Virtual machine Exodus. We would take us from the mainframe to the client server. So anything that was left, so they put me on some project. I was the only actual Shell employee. The rest were contractors. And I had to figure out how to help them integrate their payroll, which was on all the mainframe systems, onto a client server application that we had bought from some company.
Wow.
And they were like, you need to configure it based on all the rules of that location. So there were different union rules in each plant that you had to configure, which eventually puts in time, which eventually pays your pay. Because that file, then your time entry code needs to get placed off into a place where payroll can then pay based on that time you entered. And you imagine different plants, they were all doing it punch card. They're like, no. Gone are those days because we can't check you on punch card. You're gonna have to enter it in yourselves. And gone are you. So they were downsizing big time because they were losing. The whole internet thing started then to not work out, right? You know, everyone can't be internet entrepreneurs, especially an oil company. You're an oil company. You need to be an oil company, right? You can't be. You know, they got in on some of that market, but then they quickly, the Royal Dutch Shell started to buy out the U.S. shares, and so instead of the 50-50, I guess, that the shares that they had, it started to become more in the favor of the Europeans. Because they're like, we need to take you guys back over because I don't know what you guys have done trying to run your own internet business because this is going crashing miserably. So those, I would say all those three things were happening around the same time. And so from Shell Services Company became Shell Services International, where they tried to go global, and then the Dutch put their smack down on it and said, this is not working out. And so then from there, then also the concept of downsizing to offshore started to happen, right? So they're like, oh, no, we are paying way too much money here in the U.S. for staff. If we buy employees from Malaysia and India, they could basically mess up something 50 times and we'd still get our profit margin tenfold if we got rid of one employee.
Gosh.
Yeah. So the demand for the quality of service went down because they would rather get the price at the end. So all those things were happening, and then, so that was another career change. So I was like, the career change from, it was called manufacturing and oil and IT support, then I got switched to HR because it was an HR application, right? So I was helping all these oil plants, and then I remember all the contractors got let go, and I was the only sole Shell employee. And I was like, oh, I got to memorize all these laws, and so I had to keep that running. And then the HR group said, we want to hire you because you know all this stuff about our HR codes now. We want to buy the company called, it's part of Texaco. Texaco at the time. We want to buy Texaco. But we don't want to. We can't completely buy Texaco because we don't think it's a completely good business decision. So we'll just go form an alliance. So they called it an alliance, and that was a bad decision to begin with because it went down the tubes. They tried. So then what happens every time you buy a company? You got to combine your payrolls. So each time when you're in payroll, you know exactly which company they're buying. You know exactly which employees are joining forces. And they were like, we want you to do kind of what you did with that time code system with these other groups now. Because you've memorized all the time codes, you know all the rules, we need your help. Because we fired everyone else. And you're the only person left. So then I took that role, and then eventually it turned into, instead of support, then it became learning about the OSHA compliance. Because everything's about compliance in these companies. So if you know OSHA compliance, it's about looking at the training at a plant that, say a guy fell off a tractor and died. Okay, and he needed to go, and his wife 3 years later wakes up to the fact that, oh, I should have gotten probably some money compensation because she's done grieving. She's woken up to the fact she's got bills. But my job was to keep track of that training and go, well, that guy took tractor training. He should have known better, or the guy didn't take tractor training. So it's our fault, and he shouldn't have been on the tractor to begin with. So then she could probably have a business case. So being in HR, I learned, was all about litigation, because you have access to everybody's personal information, and so it was everything from the OSHA compliance to EEOC. So then there was job posting systems, so we would have visibility in all the job posting systems. So I knew the short list. I would know. So they'd always query, where are we on our short list? Are we have diverse groupings? Because they have to report that to EEOC. And if we don't, what do we do about it? So you have to discuss all that. So it was always what law linked in with what I was tracking. And so I wanted to grow beyond this, because after about 5 years, you're like, okay, well, it's still supporting IT systems. And granted, I did learn a lot. And granted, I did some creative aspects to it. And there was even another application that did charitable contributions, where you collect all the money for United Way. They just, and I would come up with ideas on, why are we collecting the money for United Way? I'm like, or why are we doing the payouts to all the United Way distribution sites? Shouldn't United Way be doing that? How much money is that costing? And so I would then start, as a result of the MBA program, you start to become smarter.
Yeah.
To figure out how to streamline and get rid of redundancy, and that's what you do in the company to move up, right? You kind of have to come up with the bright ideas that saves the company money, and then if they like it, and you could cascade that down to 5 to 10 other business, which multiplies the savings. And then so I started trying to think in that way. Well, how can we make this better so that it could save us money or make my life easier so I don't have to work as hard?
Yeah.
So it was just mostly, those kind. Then that's the challenge I always have even today, is like, how do we get rid of the redundancies in the system besides me being redundant? So I always have this mindset. My creativity has been an advantage in the meetings because they're all engineers, and so they can't think out of the box. And so they're like, no, it says in the checklist I got to do A, B, and C. And I go, well, but what about 1, 2, and 3? Well, I don't know. And you go, well, how about I challenge the system and try it, and if it works out, then I'll let you know. And they're, okay, let's see. So you have to kind of, you have to learn negotiation, and it's politics, and then it's like, well, no, I want my guy to do it. Oh, well, why do you want your guy to do it? Because I think I can do it better. And you negotiate even. I was like, gosh, everything I think I learned waiting tables, because it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
No, I want the punch train. No, I want this. Well, why do you want the punch train? Well, because this is much better, and the fresher ingredients. It's just sort of the same kind of selling, right? It's in the, but then but now that I've been in that company almost 15 years, and I've been in project management, and now I'm in risk management, I'm starting to see it's still all about the people. It's all about the people profile, and I learned way back when, and trying to figure out how you can get them to talk better together. And now that we're in a global world, it's a lot more difficult to do that.
Right.
Because I work virtually now a lot of the times, and so you can't just go to the coffee cooler and be enlightened with some kind of amazing piece of information that could get you the one up in a meeting. I'm like, I have to kind of do virtual coffee coolers and ping them on, the little messenger. What you doing? and or put your webcam on. Want to see my house? It's my house. You just, how do you build relationships now in that world? And we are lacking that right now, and how to manage virtual communities, because we're not talking enough to each other. And Europeans, they go to the bar. Houstonians, too tired to go to the bar every day. They walk home, they take trains home, so the pub's always on the way home. But for us, it's like, God, I live 2 hours away in Woodlands, in 45 minutes of traffic, and I still got to pick up milk. So you can't, you can't just say I'm going to go to a bar every day to network, and plus, that whole alcoholism thing probably isn't good either. So it's very different on managing that culture. So if I have advice for you on commerce-wise, it's so how do I creatively crack that nut? I'm like, maybe if I just come in twice a week and just say I'm going to have a coffee, and you just come. Or we'll do, I thought what I did recently was I said, okay, there's a guy, he's pretty high up, he just moved into town. He knows nobody, but he's pretty key on decisions. So how about I start a little mentoring circle for him? And I'll invite everybody and do a registration and see if they all come, just so we could formally have a place to meet and have conversations. And he's a senior leader, so he must know some kind of treasures of wisdom that he's willing to share. And it'll look good, right? He gets visibility. And then he could get information on the buzz in the system, bring it back. How do we get this? So to me, my creative side plays out in those areas. So, everybody says, oh, what do you do at Shell? Oh, I'm in risk management. I'm sorry. I'm like, no, you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
So remember how I told you I interviewed Angelina Jolie on that movie Hackers? That's pretty much what I do right now, is I prevent hackers from coming into the company.
Wow.
So because of Enron, my job boomed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like controls. It's all about controls and Sarbanes-Oxley laws and making sure that I could, my job right now is basically a combination of things. Number one, it's knowing about how to bring all those regulations into one area so we can manage the risk. What's the right amount of money that I got to advise projects to invest to implement that. Any project that comes into the company that I work for, which is called the Global Functions. So the Global Functions consists of HR, tax, legal, all those other businesses that don't either take the oil out of the ground or refine it down the line, right? So we call those the upstreams and the downstreams. And I'm in the business of managing the HR aspect, and I'm not in HR, but I'm in the Global Functions, which manages all those other extra bits of it. And I have to sit there and tell them, a project is coming along, and I have to write the executive summary to the higher ups and say whether or not I think they're up or down, kosher for their level of controls. So IT-wise, I'll go, you haven't got, maybe an easy way to show you a control is my password they're not strong enough. Okay, that's an easy version, but there's other complicated levels that go into it. And then I'll go, this project manager A doesn't know what he's talking about. B hasn't been able to articulate to me how he's protecting the system, and C doesn't have an understanding of the level of controls and risk. So it's a combination of knowing what risk is and how much money they want to throw at it. So you can protect a company with millions of dollars, but they're not willing to pay that much. Sometimes they're willing to take the risk and go, well, I'm willing to protect the company at $50,000 worth of controls. And you'll be like, okay, well, what's the risk? Are you breaking a law? If you are, then what do you think that means when people read about it in the newspaper? Oh, well, I don't want them to read about it in the newspaper. And I go, then go fix it. Because the amount of money that will cost you versus the amount of $10,000 you just spent to fix it is nothing compared to how much you're going to lose in shareholder. So that I have to always have that conversation. And so, and I always think back, I was like, if Angelina only knew. In this hacker conversation, but it really, when I, and I do talks at the little junior highs, or because I always sit there and I go, how am I going to tell these kids what I do? Like, if you guys play a video game, well, let me tell you what, life's a video game, and we just got to prevent the hackers, you know what hackers are, from getting at our stuff in the company. And so it's quite fascinating. There's like different layers to it. But what I like most about that company are the people. So and now I'll be honest with you, getting a certification in information security services professional, it can get a little boring. But because I also have a certification in project management, I'm able to help the techies talk to the business. So I found out later. I always thought my talent was a graphic designer, and putting in the layout and being the next Connie Chung. But my talent actually has become being able to get a very difficult group to work together and deliver something. Because I actually got just called over to Europe 2 weeks ago to do that. There was these two managers fighting, and I played Mama Bear. And I'm like, okay, forget all that stuff. What do we need to do for the greater good, guys? And it was just getting them to do that. And I realized and I think being the oldest of five, and then speaking for my parents has kind of brought that in. It's just kind of going back to your roots again about what that's about. And so that's my story, at least as far as where my career is in the company. But that's why I don't have a Pectin flag waving, going, show so awesome. It's got its moments and being under scrutiny and the environment and all that. But it's definitely a lot of lessons learned that are valuable. So. You could take it into life, and they employ like a huge number of people in this town, and I always try to think about it that way. Like, God, economically, you always make the Europeans not forget that, okay? Because they don't think about us being a big player sometimes in meetings.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's virtual. It's difficult to relay that. So, anyways, I'll move on to the next question for you.
No, that was great.
Yeah.
Just what we want.
It's just a lesson in my own version of labor and commerce in the company.
No, that's perfect.
Great.
We should talk a little bit about your family.
Yep.
So, when and how did you meet your husband?
My family. Oh, you're going to go there now.
We already talked about your previous.
Yeah, so we talked about my actual Filipino family. So I knew him in college. He was one of the writers.
Okay.
And but we were not dating.
Uh-huh.
The business manager was my boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
I lived with him for 7 years. So it wasn't until literally I started working for Shell and decided that, my life with my ex-boyfriend at the time, becoming my ex-boyfriend, was not the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
You start thinking like, gosh, what do I want out of life? What is the rest of my life? And you also try to understand that, who you choose to be with the rest of your life has to be a very good friend of yours.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're growing up, I guess you don't really think. To me, my priority was get out of school, get a job. So I had done that, and now I'm like, now what?
What's my next part?
And I looked at him, and I was like, okay, well, we should get married, right? And he started. What did he do? Instead of going absolutely, or I've been waiting for you to say that, it turned into a different conversation. Well, what religion should the ceremony be? And I don't know. Maybe we need to wait, and just sort of this. And maybe I'm a romantic, but I sort of had this, Danielle Steele idea in my head that I was going to be swept off my feet, and it wasn't happening. So I was like, is this going to be the rest of my life? And that's when I decided, So, anyways, so I'm not working at the paper anymore,
Yeah.
right? And but my husband Andre, he had been working at the paper, and we were somewhat good friends. I thought he was a little lazy on the commas when I edited his work, but close to some solid friends I had in high school, he's probably another person who I connected well with back then, but I didn't see him in that way. But it wasn't until I broke up with my boyfriend when I had that realization that he literally appeared the next day, just out of nowhere, standing on the curb on the street. And my friend Sophia was like, hey, she was my assistant editor way back in college, and I only had just then decided to meet up with her, just out of the blue, because I hadn't seen her in 3 years, because I had been working for Shell, and we'd sort of gone our separate ways. And I was like, hey, we'll go out for a drink. I haven't seen you in a while. I wanted to reconnect back with friends because I'd been in this relationship for so long. And he was just standing on the side of the street in Montrose, apparently in a fight with a girlfriend. And she's like, hey, you remember Andre? He's right here. And I'm just driving by. I was going to meet you for a happy hour. Let's go get connected. And I was like, okay. He's like, he was a nice guy. That's another nice person I could remember to be friends with. I could build up an entourage of people, and it won't just be about a boyfriend, because I had forgotten, apparently, how to date. So anyways, but to make a long story short, I had also right about the same time booked a trip to Europe to find myself by myself.
Wow.
And a friend of mine had told me about these Contiki vacations that you could take, and it's Australian driven and based, the company. And they basically have a bus, and they just take you around to wherever for a small amount of money, and they look after you on everything, the language, the location, they plan it, all the trips, the shopping. So I was like, that sounds like fun. And I think because I'm going with a group of people, I feel safe. And I was going to go book that vacation, and so this crossroad kind of happened. And I had just been starting to get ready to move out of my ex's. I hadn't even moved out of his house yet, and I ran into him. And he was still dating another girl, and it turned out, basically, as soon as he found out I was single, he was already on the rocks, apparently. That's why he was on the curb, because he was fighting with his girlfriend at the time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't going anywhere fast, and so he's like, oh, you didn't marry that guy. I thought you were going to. And then once he found out that I didn't, that quickly got remedied. And I go, I'm going to Europe to find myself before I figure this out. And this is going away a little too fast. But I guess we had some time together because we were friends before. I was your editor. So it doesn't count, right? So, gosh, I wish I could tell you that these days stories happen the way you want it to. But they certainly did not. Go by the book on the proper. I always tell them, I go, We probably should have dated properly. You need to go ask me out on a date. We need to go somewhere and eat and talk and get to know each other. You know, we kind of did it all backwards and out of order and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, but it was just as well. I think that once you find somebody who just connects with you and you're friends first and foremost, it just becomes easy, you know, as far as being able to talk to them. And I always have a test now, and I tell my single girlfriends, I go, if you won't hang out with them at a bar just as a friend, then chances are he's not the one.
Yeah.
You know, that's just a quick test. Can you have a really good, energetic, and conversation where you can't have enough of that person in a conversation, because you just can't wait to talk to them again about your day, or you know, even the most mundane things, because of who they are. And that's how it is today, and that's how we met, and we're still, you know, good friends and together in that way.
So when did y'all get married?
We got married in 1122, so November 1, 2002.
Okay.
And it was in Hawaii. It was beautiful.
Wow, that's so nice.
Yeah, so, yeah. I mean, there's a little timing issue with when my daughter was born. I had to do a little change management, because he proposed to me on September 14th, so we're getting very personal here. But he proposed to me on September 14th, and I think I found out I was expecting by October 1st. And I was like, So,
That's interesting.
I know, and I'm like, how am I going to manage this? Because my father is a Filipino man, and change management he does not do well with, and this is going to break his heart. You know, because my sister also had a child, and she wasn't married, and she was very young. I remember how that went down. That was not beautiful. And she had a tough time, kind of just, but she made it. You know, she did well. She ended up, you know, she works for British Gas now. But, you know, it was not an easy road, and I saw that, and I was like, ooh. And Dad, you know, had a hard time because it's his baby, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, I even had to tell my husband, I go, okay, you got to ask my hand in marriage at this day. And then we're going to, at that time, then tell everyone we're going to go to Hawaii. And if they want to come, they can come. But then they may not be able to because it's too soon. And when we come back and we have a reception party, then we can, you know, also at the reception party announce.
Yeah.
Done, done, done. And
So the timing was
the timing was
Excuse me,
confusing.
when y'all finish, can y'all just shut the door behind you?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, you know, it was, and then I wonder in our youth today if, does everyone do it perfectly anymore?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, because I meet the Europeans and they're like, what, marriage? You know, they're like, I got 3 kids. I didn't have to get married to have 3 kids. And I'm just, you know, it's different in
It
each
is.
culture.
Yeah.
And so in the Filipino culture, it's, you know, you live with your mom and dad till you're married.
Mm-hmm.
And so it might, I don't know if it's like that with your culture as well, but, you know, they wouldn't mind if we all lived in the same house still.
Yeah.
So, and my husband, I think that's what he loves about my family, because he came from, you know, he's half French and American, so he comes from a family that's, you know, was broken up, and he always like, I married your dad, you know, how did he do it? He had 5 kids, and he brought your uncles over, and my family, you know, we're just sort of scattered to the winds, and it's just completely different values.
Yeah.
You know, so it's that, you know, I think in a way he sort of longed for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, yeah. And then so I guess that's what brought us together in
Yeah.
that way.
Complimenting each other.
Well, we both kind of had parents that were from different worlds,
Yeah.
in a way. Or his dad was. Well, his mom was the daughter of a famous admiral.
Okay.
So she was a military, I guess, for lack of a better word, brat, right? You know, they traveled wherever Dad went, and she was in a family of 5 kids too.
Mm-hmm.
And he's still alive today in his 90s, right? And his grandmother's also, and she's a pretty amazing woman too. And so her stories are, she like has these albums, you know, shoved underneath her table, and she pulls them out, and there's like a picture of her with Clint Eastwood and Imelda Marcos and
Wow.
the Queen of England, you know, because, you know, he was an admiral.
Yeah.
So back then, you don't have personal assistants. You have your wives to help entertain
Yeah.
the diplomats. And so that's what she did. And I was like, gosh, this needs to be in a museum.
Yeah.
So that he brings that sort of part of his family. It's to I think our kids. These just sort of amazing little pieces of history too. And I envy that though, because in the Filipino culture, historically we don't have things in archives. It might have been in the church records, but we were caught. Filipinos are conquered so many times. Each time a church burnt, or maybe the concept of documenting things hadn't been around as long, being in an island. So I can't go back to the Middle Ages like he can on his French side to figure out where they're from. I was like, my family tree I know kind of does this so much, because they're all in that village, and eventually you intermarry somebody you're kind of related to.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know.
When were your kids born?
My daughter Jacqueline was born in May 3003, so 5/3003, and Remy was born 8/28/08. I remember Jacqueline was born. Yeah, it was about to be summer. It was getting ready to be hot,
Yeah.
and then and I was on bed rest for almost 4 months with her.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was supposedly a difficult pregnancy, but in my mind, I got to be catered to, so I
Yeah.
enjoyed that. I can easily go into a life of leisure, no problem, if I had to not work for a while. But then my son was born, I remember, and then Hurricane Ike had hit Houston.
Gosh.
So the lights were flickering on and off, and I was worried that the baby would get too hot. But we were so lucky that the cable was only out for 3 hours, and the electricity was only out for 2 hours or something.
Wow, really?
And then we would just, I don't know.
That's awesome.
It's like the forces were like, not that house.
Not
They got
the
a baby. They got a baby, So, and I remember driving around and taking pictures of everything. And
Yeah.
but yeah. So that's when they were born.
So they're so little.
They're very cute and adorable.
Yeah.
And, I always wonder how am I going to raise them,
Yeah.
in this, because now I've gone and intermarried outside the culture. And, you always, so, my husband's always very supportive. It's like, whatever you want to do. And so it was why I started that blog that Brian's talking about. And it was really around documenting oral history and recipes, but more than anything, I didn't know how to cook some of the traditional dishes. And I wanted to find a way to bring together the families, because, they also have another generation of kids that have no clue, cook rice, much less how to cook a dish
Yeah.
from the homeland. And so it started to create a bit of a buzz in our family.
Yeah.
And then, but part of it was part of a leadership program that I took with the it's called CAPA, or the Asian Pacific American Women Leadership Institute, APALI. The Center for Asian Pacific American Women, CAPA. So it's like Center for Asian Pacific American Women. Underneath them have this leadership program called APALI. And I was like, okay, I'll take Asian girl camp training because I need to get connected back with who I am. Like I said, I jokingly said I'm the whitest girl I know. And so I need to figure out that bit of it. And so they challenge you on this concept called whole person leadership. And so they're like, what part of yourself, and you kind of do this little wheel, family, friends, and all that stuff. Do you think you're lacking in who you are? Because if you don't know who you are, how can you lead others?
Yeah.
And so they pushed me, and I appreciate that they did, because I learned so much about the challenge. And then I started I said, I'm just going to, they said, you need to impact 25 people. And I go, I know 25 people in my family. And so I did that, and I held what they call a merienda, which is like a light snack. But then I also learned that Filipinos are incapable of light snacks, because when you have a family of 25, and they're making 25 dishes, it's a party.
Yeah.
Right? They got it. There's no light snack. So, but if you ever read my blog, I talk about how that party went down. But between all the rosaries and the food, it was just hilarious, because I did not expect it. I just thought we were going to go bring your dish. You're going to talk about it. You're going to write your little story. You're going to give me a copy of your recipe. We're done, right?
Uh-huh.
No, it was like everybody wrote their dish. Nobody wrote anything down. The next thing you know, people were like, well, why are we here? I go, well, there's this project I'm working on. And then after that, they already turned off What? It's not somebody's birthday? And so I ended up having to convince them, right, that this was, okay, I think Grandma died about this time a few years ago, right? So that's why we're together.
Oh my God.
We're honoring her dishes, okay? Stop asking me why we're here. Oh, well, Judy's birthday was last week, my sister. That's why we're here. Eventually my sister's like, Christy's just having a Filipino party. Oh, okay. Whose birthday is it again? So they just couldn't wrap their mind around the mission.
Yeah.
So that came to bite me in the end, because then they were like, oh, well, if we're honoring grandmother, we have to have a novena.
Oh gosh.
I know, Christy, where's your altar? I go, I'm nervously putting together an altar. I go, where's that Virgin Mary I gave you? I'm being shamed every 5 seconds now because I don't have my altar. I don't have, my Virgin Mary and
Oh my God.
a visual. And I look at it now, it's funny. But at the time, I'm in this panic, and I'm looking for a red satin cloth to put over the children's kid table and an instant altar. And all of a sudden, I turn behind me. All the dishes on the table, nobody's touching them yet. I turn behind me, and the entire room kneels down. 25 people in front of the altar. And my aunt happened to have rosaries in her purse.
Oh my
Not
gosh.
just one, like 12. So she's passing that around the room, and I'm just like, this is not what I envisioned for my party, but okay. So, I'm sitting there, and, God forbid you forgot the Hail Mary, because you were just going to be instantly shamed after that. And, Christy, it's your turn. Lead the prayer. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope I remember all the words.
Yeah.
And then they were like, well, don't you need to make a plate for Grandma? And I'm like, my sister's like, don't the Chinese do that? We Filipinos don't do that. We've never done that at a party. And I was like, okay, but we got to make a plate for the grandma. Let's just make a plate so they don't, and I'm making a plate. And then my uncle's like, you need to hide it in a room because the ghosts like to eat by themselves. I'm like, who makes this stuff up? I'm just like, and that's the Filipino-ness, right? Happening just everywhere. And I probably in a normal situation I wouldn't pick up on that, but because I was in an observation mode
Yeah.
of writing, of like, how am I going to articulate?
Okay. Yes. Okay. So where were we?
Well, I think I was finishing up the story on going into observation mode at the
Yeah.
party. So
Yeah.
that was usually it's second nature to just go through the motions of what you do in your culture. But unless you're consciously making an effort on trying to observe the nuances, then you're not going to be able to pick up on it. So that was, I think, the lesson that I learned in that project. So that's I think that's where we left off on the
Yeah.
on that whole event. But like I said, it's a blog that it feeds into the blog that I'm doing, and it was inspired through the Asian women's group that I'm involved through in the leadership program, and then I got to present that at Washington D.C. So I don't know if I had the opportunity to do that project if I was able to do something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have done something like that on my own without
Without
the
that.
help of that framework of the leadership program to challenge me on my whole person leadership. So,
Okay.
yeah. And I think we talked, we moved into a little bit more about
Into-
the community involvement.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
am I active in the Filipino community in Houston? And I'm involved through. So of course through that program, the Asian Pacific American Women's Group, the center, and the Asian Women Empowered. It's allowed me to be able to connect with other Filipinos. So I met a couple people who are interested in connecting me into the various activities that are happening. So there's a huge community in Houston. Probably more newer generations. There's probably a lot of even the older school, because as I keep asking questions, they tell me about people who immigrated here about the 60s and the 70s, and some people will argue with you that the boom really didn't happen until the 80s. So, because they're like, the engineer boom happened in the 80s, and I'm like, well, actually, the nursing boom happened first.
Yeah.
So, but I'm involved. I'm trying to get more involved, but it's also finding ways to looking at the networks I'm already strong in, like the women's groups, to figure out how do I integrate that into Asian community. So, one example is the Lions Club there's a Lions Club full of Filipino members, and then they're trying to integrate me into it because I asked a friend, introduce me to more Filipinos, and then she was like, okay, I'll introduce you to more Filipinos, but this guy, he's part of a Lions Club, and he's part of another group, and so you might want to seek some inspiration through his project. So maybe if you support his project, then you could eventually be brought in. So it's not a black and white answer going, this is how I get involved with the Filipino community. You have to, just like with any network, they have to learn to trust you. Just like with my dad, right? You just can't walk in his house and try to sell him water filters or mini blinds. He has to learn to trust you, and over time, I think you're good at that, and maybe. So there's a back to school drive that's being run by Nelvin Adriatico, and he heads up a couple pretty high profile groups in Houston that are Filipino, and he gets the mayor involved, and so I got to meet him, and then in the same time I got to bring him into the Asian Chamber of Commerce. And let him have a seat at our shell table, which is like $250 a head. So we kind of have been working in a very organic way of building that relationship. So I'm trying to find ways to reconnect back into that community.
Okay.
But at the same time, how does it also service other communities? Because I didn't grow up just sticking to one group of people, So, I'm married to a white male, for God's sake. So, how do I find different ways to honor that part of me, but at the same time help the greater good? Yeah. So.
And then I asked you about your goals for
Yes.
the future.
Yes. So we talked a little bit about. One day I will start that magazine,
Yes.
right? And then, but it all is going to begin. But I started with my family being really. My goals in the future is to work to make sure that they're comfortable and happy. That's the driver, the value driver that I have in my beliefs. And because I also mentioned that you can't help others unless you help yourself, and so a lot of that is having the right job or being able to. How do I work for Shell without compromising my identity? It's always something I challenge myself to do, so I always have to try to create a community within that. And so I do the Women's Career Development Program there, but then I take the lessons that I learned from there and try to bring them into my stories. So, like I said, the blog has allowed me to just, in a way, build research that's eventually hopefully going to feed into children's books that I want to write one day. So, And I want the children's book to be about the nuances of growing up as a Filipino. Because when I was younger, I was embarrassed about a lot of the things that my family did. And they were, everybody's got their mannerisms that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they did that in public. But there are cultural things that every Filipino kid could probably identify with. But as an American child growing in the U.S., you tend to identify with the fact that that's not a very American thing to do, and that's, oh my gosh, so embarrassing. So in the leadership program, one of the teachers read a poem out loud in an angry voice, and then she read it again in a more peaceful voice. And you find that the more peaceful voice was more impactful and enlightening. And I want to take that same concept into the children's book, where they are very embarrassed and ashamed at first and angry, but then they kind of take those same nuances with a different perception on the other half of the book and actually become very proud of the things that really they thought made them stand out and embarrassed. So that's what I want to do. One day, like I said, I'll find a way to integrate it all, because in the end of the day, anything you do feeds into each other, and you don't want to have any wasted energy in something in your life that's not meaningful. I think I always try to find the connections, and if that was any advice I'd have is to, to find a way to be artistic at an oil company, or find a way to, in your own life at home, look for the story that needs to be told, or in the food that you eat, the blog that needs to be written. So, I think that's starting to fulfill me in a lot of ways, and there's always the journey that you have to go on to continue to challenge to find yourself, because I think that in itself will inspire others to come along on the trip with you. So,
Thank you so much for taking time
problem.
and allowing us to interview you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and
Yeah.
hopefully we captured everything. And
Yeah, I hope so.
yeah, and then, like you said, 20 years from now, maybe we'll
Yeah.
pick up and see what happens.
That would be
To be continued.
so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so I look forward to it.
Yeah.